You've tried everything. Calm conversations. They twisted your words. Forgiveness. They used it as a passport to hurt you again. Second chances. They saw it as a chance to dig their claws in deeper. And at some point you realize the only way to reclaim your freedom isn't through arguments or logic. It's by going completely no contact. But here's the question that haunts millions of survivors of toxic relationships. Should you block them completely or just ignore them? What really gets under the narcissist's skin? And more importantly, which choice actually helps you heal? Not just survive, but rebuild for real. In today's video, we're peeling back the layers of a narcissist's mind to understand what happens when you vanish. Not as someone who's running away, but as someone who's finally awake and choosing themselves. We'll uncover why narcissists can't stand being ignored, why sometimes blocking them may actually feed their ego in the short term, and why calm, intentional silence can be the most devastating blow to their distorted sense of control. If you're on a healing journey, or if you simply want to understand the invisible power games narcissists play, this video is for you. We're not just talking about cutting contact. We're talking about reclaiming your peace, your strength, and your identity. Hit that subscribe button because every week we're exposing another hidden truth and helping you rise stronger than ever before. Here's something most people don't realize: narcissists aren't afraid of being hated. They don't even mind being confronted. What they truly fear, what rattles them to the core, is being ignored. Being treated as though they never existed. Losing their grip on your thoughts, your emotions, your life. You might think that blocking their number, unfollowing them, and disappearing from their social media is too harsh. But for a narcissist, it's not the act itself that crushes them. It's the meaning behind it. You've stopped seeing them as the center of your world. You've taken back the power they once used to manipulate you. To someone who thrives on control, nothing is worse than facing a door that's been shut for good. No message, no drama, no back door left open. It signals one terrifying truth: they no longer control you. Blocking them might give them a brief sense of significance. After all, it's still a reaction. It tells them you feel something. But if you simply go quiet, if you vanish without noise, without a farewell, that's the deadliest blow of all. Because that silence doesn't come from pain. It comes from clarity. The narcissist expects you to come back, maybe to apologize, argue, or seek closure. They need you to keep playing the role they wrote for you. But when you stop participating, when you walk off their stage, they're forced to face a crushing truth. They're no longer the lead character in your story. That's when the spiral begins. Anger, obsession, denial, desperate attempts to pull you back in or delude themselves that you'll return, but you don't. You stay silent. You say nothing. And in that silence, they're left to confront what they've always tried to escape: their irrelevance in someone else's world. And if you're strong enough not to react, not to chase closure or scream for justice, then you've already won. Not through revenge, but through the quiet, unshakable power of letting go. Once you've come to understand that silence can be your sharpest weapon, the next question naturally arises. Is silence alone enough? Or do you need to go all the way and block them completely? Cut off every avenue for return? This is where things get tricky. Because blocking and ignoring may seem similar, but they actually send very different signals to the narcissist. Let's peel back the layers. When you block a narcissist, delete their number, unfollow them, remove them from your social feeds, you're slamming the door in their face. You're saying, you no longer have access to me, not even to watch from afar. And that hurts them deeply. Because narcissists don't just want to control you through conversation, they want access. They want to see you suffer, to monitor your weakness, to feed their ego through your pain. Blocking cuts off that supply. But here's the twist. In the narcissist's distorted perception, blocking is still an emotional reaction. And in their mind, you only block someone if you still feel something. It means, in their twisted logic, that they still matter. Ironically, that may actually validate them, even a little, because for them being hated still feels better than being forgotten. Now contrast that with ignoring. When you don't block, don't reply, don't speak. You simply fade into silence and move on. That's not a slap in the face, it's erasure. And for a narcissist, that's far worse. That silence doesn't stem from rage, it comes from indifference. You didn't slam the door because you no longer care about the room behind it. Still ignoring comes with a risk they might come back to test you. Without the hard stop of a block, some narcissists see your silence as a leftover opportunity, a chance to manipulate, provoke, or sneak back in through mutual contacts or indirect communication. So the real question is, are you strong enough to ignore without flinching? Or do you need to create an iron boundary by blocking them completely? The answer depends on one thing: your boundaries and how far the narcissist is willing to go to violate them. A narcissist doesn't understand boundaries the way a healthy person does. To them, no doesn't mean stop. Silence doesn't mean closure. And distance is never a true goodbye, it's just a pause before their next comeback. In their distorted reality, every limit you set, from ignoring texts to blocking their number, isn't interpreted as self-protection. It's seen as a direct challenge to their inflated ego. And if you've ever been the one who softened, who reopened the door after they knocked with fake remorse or hollow promises, then you need to understand this: a narcissist never forgets. They remember exactly when and how you crumbled. To them, it's not love. It's data. It's proof that you can still be controlled. That's why when you're faced with the question block or ignore, it's not a technical decision. It's a statement of how far you're willing to go to protect yourself. If this person has violated your privacy, manipulated others to get to you, or returned in the form of sweet-sounding emotional abuse, then blocking them is necessary. Not because you're afraid, but because you understand the level of threat they pose and you choose survival guided by logic, not emotion. But if you've reached a place of calm, where no reaction is necessary, where their return no longer stirs you, where you don't even care to hear their excuses, then your silence becomes a sentence they can't appeal. Because what truly terrifies a narcissist isn't your anger, it's your indifference. They know how to argue. They know how to twist the truth when accused. But they have no defense against your apathy. There's no conversation to manipulate, no emotion to feed on, no opening to exploit. And in that moment, when you no longer need to explain, no longer need to win, you're no longer the one running. You've become the one who has risen above them. However, blocking might sound simple. A single tap, a single decision, something that feels final. But the truth is, blocking only works when it's done fully, firmly, and without exceptions. To a narcissist, even a slightly open door is an invitation. A crack in your wall is a potential entrance. They don't see blocking as the end unless you make it a sealed-off fortress with no way back in. So if you've decided to block them, then do it thoroughly. Don't just block their phone number and leave your email open. Don't unfriend them while keeping your social media public. Don't block their main account while ignoring their fake ones. And above all, don't let your heart leave a door open out of pity. Here's what you need to understand. They know exactly where your emotional weaknesses are, and they'll aim straight for them. They won't come back with a genuine apology. They won't say, "I've hurt you. You deserved better." No, they'll come back with emotional bait, vague messages designed to tug at your empathy. "I miss our child. You're the only one who ever truly understood me. If you don't hate me, just one text. I I just want to say one last thing. These messages aren't innocent. They're strategic. They're sugar-coated hooks meant to pierce the softest part of you. And if you respond even once, you've broken your own emotional defense system. Don't forget, the narcissist doesn't need your love. They only need proof that they can still move you. One response is a win. One reply is all they need to know you're still within reach. So if you're going to block as a statement, not a test. Block the number, block the email, block every social media account, block their burner accounts, and if needed, block the memories. Remove keepsakes, delete old photos, erase every lingering thread that makes your heart waver with what could have been. Because you're not just walking away from a person. You're walking away from a system of manipulation built on fake emotion, false memories, and counterfeit love. If you share children, set clear legal boundaries. Communicate through monitored platforms or mediators. Never allow 2 a.m. messages that say, "I miss our child," to become a backdoor into your peace. And if you find yourself weakening, remind yourself, they're not coming back because they love you. They're coming back because you were once easy to reach. And every time you soften, you confirm the door isn't really closed. But you've come too far to go back now, haven't you? You've cried enough. You've forgiven too many times for the same wound. And now, if peace is what you want, you cannot leave even the smallest crack open. This isn't the time to be polite, not the time to be understanding. This is the time to say, "I choose myself," and this time, I choose finality. But you might think that once you've blocked them, cut off all contact, vanished from every platform, and kept your silence, that it's over, that you've won, that you've finally escaped their influence. But the truth is, that's only the surface. Because when you disconnect, when you fall silent, what you're really doing is forcing the narcissist to switch strategies. And believe me, no one pivots faster or more manipulatively than a narcissist who's lost control. Your silence is something they didn't expect. In their world, silence doesn't mean closure. It means pause. It's a space they interpret not as rejection, but as a waiting room, an opportunity to regroup, redesign, and re-enter. They begin crafting new scripts, all with one goal: to pull you back in. Not through the same tactics. They know you're no longer the naive version of yourself they once manipulated. This time, they come wrapped in something else: kindness, sorrow, spiritual awakening, even regret. And if you're not fully awake, you'll fall into the same trap, only now it's dressed in sincerity, cloaked in late-night longing, and dripping with carefully curated vulnerability. When you fall silent, their first move is often to play the victim. They start telling friends, family, mutual acquaintances that you abandoned them, that you were cold, that they tried, they loved you, they wanted to work things out, but you shut them down. And no, they won't say these things to your face. They're smarter than that. They'll seed these stories in places where they know the words will find their way back to you. Because they know one thing about you: you have a kind heart. And if they can strike the right nerve, if they can trigger that whisper of guilt or doubt, they believe they still have a chance. If that doesn't work, they switch gears. They become the improved version of themselves. Suddenly they're posting deep introspective quotes about growth, healing, and forgiveness. They join spiritual groups. They volunteer. They publicly apologize, not to you directly, but on social media in vague, poetic terms meant for you to interpret. They're not transforming. They're performing. This isn't about redemption. It's about planting just enough confusion in your mind that you start to wonder, maybe I misjudged them. Maybe they really are changing. Sometimes they disappear completely. No messages, no presence, nothing. And you start to think, finally, they've let go. But then, Right when your life starts to feel stable again, when you're finally beginning to breathe freely, a message pops up. I don't want anything, just a moment of your time. Or, you don't have to reply. I just miss what we had. Subtle, non-threatening, calm. But that's what makes it dangerous. It strikes at your deepest core, the part of you that still longs for fairness, for closure, for a final chapter written with dignity. And if you respond just once, the cycle begins again. Because the narcissist doesn't need your love, they just need your reaction. That one response tells them everything they need. The door is still open, and they'll walk back in wearing a new costume, more calculated than before, more patient. Like a seasoned salesperson, they're not selling themselves, they're selling hope. If they realize you truly won't respond, they shift to another tactic targeting the people around you. They reach out to your friends. They show up in places they know you go. They send gifts to your parents or comment on your mutual friends' posts. They make their presence known through others, knowing full well you can't block what's not directly aimed at you. And this is often where survivors let their guard down because they feel safe. But manipulation doesn't always knock at your front door. Sometimes it slips in through the back window, smiling familiar, disguised as coincidence. Every move they make, playing the victim, reinventing themselves, going silent, then resurfacing, enlisting third parties, is designed with a singular purpose: to bring you back to a state of emotional vulnerability. To get you back to that place where your judgment weakens, where your empathy overrides your memory, and where your hope starts whispering, maybe this time it'll be different. But the truth is, it never is. Narcissists don't change. They rebrand. And each time you return, you lose a little more faith in your own instincts, your own truth. You begin to doubt the very clarity that saved you the first time. That's why when you go silent, you must stay silent. No responses, no explanations, no just one message, no vague posts, no status updates hoping they'll read between the lines, because you owe them nothing. You are no longer someone seeking to be heard. You are someone who has heard enough. Your silence is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is the quiet power of someone who understands the game and refuses to play it. It is the calm of someone who knows that peace is louder than any argument. That absence, when intentional, is more powerful than presence used as a weapon. And here's what you must always remember. You are no longer the one running from the narcissist. You are the one they can no longer reach. You have risen above them not through noise but through stillness, not by winning a war, but by walking away from a battlefield they can no longer drag you back to. You don't need to scream to prove you were hurt. You don't need to convince anyone that what you felt was real. You only need to live fully, freely, peacefully, and let that peace speak for itself. And when it does, it will say clearly, even in silence, you no longer have power here. Not anymore. And that's the paradox, isn't it? You've gone silent, you've walked away, you've blocked every possible entry point, and still so many people go back. Why? Why do countless survivors, after all the tears, all the promises never to return, end up right back where they started? And more importantly, how can you make sure you're not one of them? The answer isn't weakness. It lies in a deep psychological mechanism within all of us, one the narcissist knows how to exploit all too well. They don't attack your logic. They attack your memories, your emotions, your yearning for justice, for clarity, for closure. They don't need to convince you with reason. All they need to do is make you feel that maybe you were too harsh, that maybe they've truly changed that. Maybe you owe them one last chance to end things the right way. And in that moment, you betray yourself. Most people don't go back because they're still in love. They go back because they never got closure. They think they need a final apology, an acknowledgement of the pain, a single honest moment where the narcissist says, "I was wrong." But with a narcissist, you will never get that. Not because they don't know they're wrong, but because they cannot allow you to be right. Your departure, your silence, your healing, these are a threat to their illusion of control, and they'll do whatever they can to rewrite the narrative as long as you let them. Going back, even if it feels like you're resolving unfinished business, is not healing. It's reopening the wound. Every time you let them back in, you teach them that your boundaries are bendable, that your silence had conditions, that the door wasn't really locked, and they will use that gently, strategically, but no less destructively. To avoid being pulled back in, you must understand this. Closure doesn't come from them, it comes from you. You don't need their confession to validate your experience. You don't need their apology to forgive yourself. And you certainly don't need their return to end things properly. That kind of ending only exists in fairy tales, not in the toxic reality of narcissistic abuse. You must write your own ending with your own hands by continuing to live, to grow, and to refuse re-entry to anything or anyone that once fractured your spirit. Forgiveness does not require access. Understanding does not require reconnection. And maturity does not mean sacrificing your peace to satisfy someone who once thrived on your pain. The narcissist's return is never pure. It always carries an agenda to reclaim control, to regain your attention, or simply to prove to themselves that you are still their possession. But you're not that person anymore. You no longer seek to be understood. You no longer wait for them to see your worth. And that's exactly why you don't need to go back. Let this truth settle deeply within you every time you choose not to go back. You break the cycle they used to keep you. Every time you don't respond, you affirm to yourself, "I am worthy of a life that doesn't include them." Not because they weren't important, but because you've become more important to yourself. Once you've understood that refusing to go back is the key to breaking the cycle of manipulation, the next truth you need to embrace is this: no contact is not just a strategy, it's a declaration, a profound choice, a form of strength that doesn't need to scream to be heard. You might think that not responding to messages, blocking a number, or deleting social media accounts are just small, technical steps. But in reality, every time you choose silence, you are saying to the world and to yourself, "I deserve a peaceful life." This isn't avoidance. This is deliberate withdrawal from a distorted reality where your emotions were once used as weapons against you. People on the outside may not understand. They might say you're being cold, unforgiving, or lacking compassion, but they weren't in your skin. They didn't see your blank stare when exhaustion took over. They didn't hear the choked sobs you swallowed at night when everything inside was falling apart. Only you know silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally care enough about yourself. No contact isn't just about cutting off communication with one person. It's about refusing to return to the version of yourself that tolerated far too much, that shrank, just to keep the peace, that sacrificed your values to hold on to something labeled love that felt more like captivity. You're no longer that person. You've risen. And your silence is not due to lack of words, it's because they are no longer worthy of hearing them. That silence to the narcissist is the ultimate loss of control. They're used to yelling matches, emotional breakdowns, desperate texts. Because in all those reactions, they still hold power. But when you're no longer reactive, not angry, not bitter, not needing answers, their entire power structure crumbles. Because your silence says, "You no longer influence my inner world." And that's the truth they cannot bear. In your silence, you are speaking volumes. You're saying, I choose to walk away rather than beg for change. You're saying, I choose healing over repetition. And you're saying, I choose me. This kind of resolve doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need applause. It's a private act of defiance that has the power to reshape your entire life. Think about how many times you've tried to be heard, to be understood, to be validated by someone who only saw your pain as leverage. How many times you've explained, defended, or forgiven, hoping they'd finally see you, only to be left with emptiness, or worse, the guilt of thinking maybe I was the problem. That's why when you choose no contact, you're not just saying no to them, you're saying yes to yourself, yes to worth, yes to recovery, yes to a life that no longer revolves around emotional landmines and confusion disguised as love. You don't need to win an argument. You don't need them to agree that you were right, because the real victory is in the ability to walk away quietly and still keep your peace. And if someone ever asks you, why so extreme? Why not keep a line of polite communication open? Smile gently, because they don't know that sometimes politeness is the fastest way to reopen the gates of hell. Silence is not the end. It's the opening to something new, a journey back to yourself. When you leave a toxic relationship, especially with a narcissist, you're not just walking away from a person. You're leaving behind a version of yourself, the version that was manipulated, minimized, made to believe you weren't enough. And that's why after going no contact, the emptiness often creeps in. Not because you miss them, but because you're stepping into a space even you don't fully recognize yet. Healing doesn't begin by trying to forget them. It begins by remembering who you are. Who you were before the gaslighting, before you learned to shrink yourself so they wouldn't leave, before you got used to sacrificing peace for proximity and silence for safety. You'll need time to rebuild trust, not with others, but with yourself. To trust that you're not too sensitive, that your intuition was valid, that the boundaries you set are worthy of respect, not guilt. You'll begin to notice small but powerful things, the relief of no longer explaining yourself constantly, the mental freedom of not tiptoeing around someone's mood swings, the joy of doing things simply because you want to, not to earn approval or avoid punishment. And one day you'll look back and they won't be at the center of your story anymore. They'll just be a chapter in it. You are the destination. True healing begins when you stop idealizing the one who broke you. When you're brave enough to face the truth, love shouldn't drain you. Connection shouldn't cost your self-worth. And real relationships don't require you to lose yourself in the process. Healing begins the moment you place your hand over your heart and whisper, I deserve more than this. That's when the real journey begins. It's not always easy. But every step you take toward yourself is one more step away from the person who can no longer pull you back. You're no longer living to prove anything. You're living to become. This isn't an escape. It's a return. You may have been led to believe that walking away is failure, that silence is weakness, that not going back means you're bitter, unforgiving, or cold-hearted. But those are just the echoes of a manipulative system you've finally broken free from. And today, if you've made it this far, if you've had the courage to go, no contact, to stay silent, to endure the lonely nights that clarity often brings, then you are no longer a victim. You are a survivor. And more than that, you are finally becoming yourself again. No contact is not just cutting communication. It's a quiet declaration from someone who once felt small, now choosing to rise without shouting. It's the moment you pull back your energy from a place that drained you and redirect it somewhere far more deserving, your heart, your soul, your life. Throughout this journey, you've felt it all: doubt, anger, emptiness. You've had moments when you almost texted back just to ask why, but somehow you didn't. You didn't choose the short road back into another painful cycle. You chose the longer, harder, but more honest road. And now you know love shouldn't have to hurt to prove it's real. A true relationship doesn't ask you to sacrifice yourself to keep it. Someone who truly loves you will never make you feel like you are the problem. You were never wrong for believing. You were never weak for giving. You just needed to learn how to love again this time, beginning with yourself. Healing doesn't happen in a single moment. It doesn't come from a book, a video, or a piece of advice. Healing comes from the small but firm decisions you make every day, when you don't answer that message, when you don't check their social media, when you stop justifying things that once broke you. Healing begins when you no longer need a reason because you've finally accepted that not everyone is willing to face the truth. And one day you'll wake up and realize their name no longer stings. You'll pass by the old places without choking up. You'll hear that song that once made you cry, and this time you'll just smile. Because finally, you've walked the full circle and come out the other side as someone new, stronger, clearer, freer. No one can return the time you lost, but you can choose not to lose another moment to something that never deserved you. You've done what not everyone has the strength to do. You cut ties. You walked away. You honored the silence. And you chose yourself. That's not running away. That's awakening. If this journey has meant something to you, share it. Someone out there is still fighting in silence the way you once were. And if you need a place to continue healing, to grow, to build a life free from emotional manipulation, hit subscribe and walk with me through the next chapter.